Oh, you know what that means. The sound of the choir can only mean one thing. It's time for our weekly fantasy football preview, and it is week 4. We are almost one third of the way through the 2021 fantasy football regular season. Whether you are 0-3 right now, 1-2, 2-1, or 3-0, there is still hope for you to make the fantasy football playoffs and ultimately bring home a fantasy football championship. How are you doing? You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 7 seasons. Let's make it 8 in 2021. But enough of me, I'm here for you. And without further ado, let's just jump straight into our week 4 previews, breaking down every single game, the matchups, the injuries, and who you should start and who you should sit to ultimately secure that week 4 victory. Let's just dive right into it this week, and we're going to kick off with the 1 o'clock games. And the first game that we're going to look at is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. But before we get into this matchup, do me a favor, hit that like button down below to show your support for this video. Also, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode from me. We're going to be introducing some new kinds of content throughout the week as well, so it's not just going to be these previews, so be sure to hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any of the new action over here on the channel. But let's just dive right in, shall we? The Chiefs taking on the Eagles in Philadelphia and for Kansas City. I mean, come on, guys. You know the drill by now. Mahomes, Clyde, Tyreek, Travis Kelce. I love teams like this, and I actually love both of these teams because their offenses can be so explosive at times. Obviously, we know how great Kansas City is, and Philadelphia has the makings to be a very good offense in this league. But for like the Chiefs in particular, it's just fun. I love putting these together. But for the Chiefs, it's just like copy, paste, because you're never going to bench one of these guys, right? Mahomes is always going to be in your lineup. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a great game in week 3. Tyreek doesn't leave your lineup, neither does Travis Kelce. You start your Chiefs. We've been doing this for a few years now. You know how this goes. For the Eagles, I really just expect this to be a shootout. Eagles, a little bit of a dud game last week versus Dallas, but I think they'll still be okay because, look, if you got to beat Kansas City, there's only one way to do it, and that's by hanging 50 on the board and going into that game in a shootout-style format. So Jalen Hurts in your lineup, Miles Sanders, Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor, all guys that should be in your lineup. I still don't love Dallas Goedert that much, especially because of the fact that he's still competing with Zach Ertz for playing time and targets, and that's just never really a good thing. So stick with what we know. We're gonna go with the mainstays of each offense with the Chiefs and the Eagles. Our next game, whoops, that's a wrong screen there. Apologies about that. Our next game is going to be my Panthers taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Look, my Panthers are 3-0, but that being said, has been a fairly easy schedule. I mean, you're looking at 2 wins versus the Texans and the Jets, but 3-0 is 3-0. So we take wins any way that we get them. For the Panthers, Chris McCaffrey is out with that hamstring injury that he suffered in the week 3 win versus the Texans. But this is another game where I'm just looking at this and it's like the only way that this is. I gotta make a change here real quick. Whoops, that's an oversight on my end. All right, got him. I'm looking at this, though, as another game that could be a shootout. Has all of the makings because very similar to Kansas City, the way to beat Dallas is that it's a race to 45. Whoever hangs the most points is going to win that game in particular. Defenses are not great here. I should say the Cowboys defense is not great. The Cowboys have the much better offense, and I think that's going to be the thing that really controls this game. So I'm in on Darnold. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is going to be the running back to play. Royce Freeman's going to be involved. But when you look at what happened when Christian McCaffrey went down, Chuba Hubbard, 11 carries, 5 receptions, was just being used all over the place. He wasn't great. Like, he was fine. You would have liked to have seen him rip off maybe a big run or two in that action versus the Texans. But Chuba Hubbard, especially with the absence of CMC, going to be a guy who's likely going to be in your starting lineup as that replacement. You also have DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, guys that should be in your lineup. I know that Robbie Anderson has had a rough start to the year so far. Really has only played well in about one game or so, and that was the week 1 where he caught the long touchdown versus the Jets. But again, in a game like this where it's going to be a race to just hang points on the board, Darnold's been playing well this year. I still believe in DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. Just trust the process with these players and trust the offense that the Carolina Panthers are putting together. And then for the Dallas Cowboys, Dak, Zeke, Amari, CeeDee Lamb in your lineup ready to go. I just don't trust Michael Gallup in full at this point, even still. If you need to as a deep flex play, maybe you lost Julio or A.J. Brown and you got to throw a dart throw. You have worse options than Michael Gallup. But just trusting this offense and trusting what it can be and what it can do, go ahead and do it. Tony Pollard, I'm just not there yet still. When you look at what Pollard's done, it's been one game was good, one game was meh, one game was bad. So what do we make of all of this yet? You shouldn't be trying to put that risk in your lineup at this point in the season. Now let's go to the Titans and the Jets, where speaking of the injuries to A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, yeah, both these guys are out. And that stinks because this matchup versus the Jets is supreme. And actually on the other side too, you're looking at injuries for the Jets wide receivers as well, with Elijah Moore out with this game with that concussion, and Jamison Crowder questionable with the groin injury. So when you look at what we're doing in terms of starts for this game as a whole, for the Jets, I'm only starting Corey Davis because the other players in this offense have not earned my trust yet up until this point. And then for Tennessee, Derrick Henry, always going to be in your starting lineup. I guess Chester Rogers, and I need that, that should be a giant question mark, Chester Rogers. But to me, this just comes down to the fact of who else is Ryan Tannehill going to throw the ball to right now? Chester Rogers, Josh Reynolds. It's going to have to be one of those two. Des Fitzpatrick maybe. But if I had to pick one, I'm going to pick Chester Rogers just because of the fact that he got in the end zone last week. So I'm kind of chasing the points there in that regard. But all of this really just turns out to me to mean that we are not playing Ryan Tannehill in this game. The matchup is juicy, it's good. The Jets defense is really fucking bad, but he just doesn't have the weapons that he normally has, which obviously boosts Tannehill's floor and his ceiling up so much. Without those weapons, you're really rolling with Derrick Henry in this game for the Titans, and that's about it. Now let's go to the Giants taking on the Saints, and more injuries. Week 3, I know week 2 we kind of felt like the injury bug creeping up. Week 3, the Reaper just really came out and slaughtered every single wide receiver core, it feels like. For the Giants, Sterling Shepard is out, as well as Darius Slayton, both with those hamstring injuries, which just stinks, especially just because Sterling Shepard was playing so well up until that point, and I was actually somebody that started Sterling Shepard in week 3 and likely lost my matchup because of it, and Darius Slayton unfortunately suffered that injury as well. So for the Giants, you're looking at Saquon and Kenny Golladay in your starting lineup. Don't trust Daniel Jones without a fully healthy cast of weapons there either. But Saquon had no injury designated last week. Popped up on the injury report this week, but to me it's really not that big of a deal. And Kenny Golladay is just perpetually always on the injury report. He always sticks it out and plays though. For the Saints, no injuries to report here. Alvin Kamara in your lineup. Jameis Winston, maybe, if you absolutely have to. I see the world where you do play Jameis here against this Giants defense, but when you look at what's really transpired over the course of the past 3 weeks, the past 2 weeks, not including week 1, who is Jameis throwing the ball to? And that's where I'm really just hung up on this, where Jameis every single week is going to have the potential to go crazy because that's just what Jameis does, right? We know Jameis is essentially guaranteed for 250, 2-2, and that does equate to fantasy points. But when you look at the roster and the depth chart of who he's throwing the ball to, there's really no confidence behind any of those names, and that's where you lose me. So Jameis, if you have to, if you have better options, I would look elsewhere though. Going over to the Browns and the Vikings, Jarvis out again with that MCL sprain, and for the Browns, Chubb, Kareem, and Odell pretty much always going to be in your starting lineup there. Baker in this matchup is interesting, but I do think this is going to skew to be a very run-heavy game. Just both these teams love to run the ball. And that brings us over to the Vikings side, where Dalvin Cook is questionable with an ankle injury, was limited in practice this week. I think he plays. If he doesn't, Alexander Mattison should be up and in your lineup. But then we're going to go with the usual here. Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, whoever the running back is, and then Justin Jefferson. These are all going to be auto starts for you this week. And Kirk Cousins, again, maybe. Like, this kind of feels like one of those Kirk Cousins games. They're at home. The Browns defense has been so-so throughout the course of the season so far. So with that being said, if you want a streaming option, like, I would rather play Kirk Cousins in this matchup than Jameis Winston and his matchup versus the Giants. Up next, Detroit taking on Chicago at Soldier Field. And no injuries to report for the Lions. For the Bears, though, Andy Dalton questionable with that knee injury. Matt Nagy, head coach, said that it's going to be a game-time decision who starts at quarterback between Andy Dalton and Justin Fields, and that just tells me I'm not playing either of them at the quarterback position. No, thank you. And even still, like, I'm really questioning Allen Robinson. Are we still confident throwing Allen Robinson in our lineup week in, week out? Really hasn't gotten it done up until this point in the season. To me, this is kind of the last straw with that. You just trust the talent that he has and the fact that he's going to be somebody that commands targets, and that's why I'm trusting Allen Robinson in this great matchup versus the Detroit Lions. David Montgomery, running back, never leaves your lineup for Chicago. For Detroit, speaking of running backs that never leave your lineup, DeAndre Swift, definitely in that category. Jamal Williams, if you need that flex play as well, always going to be a good one for you this year. And we also know that the pass game revolves around TJ Hawkinson, and we are never going to touch a Detroit Lions wide receiver this season as long as they continue to just not have anybody of note at that position. Now let's go over to the Texans taking on the Bills in Buffalo. No injuries to report for either team here. Starts for Houston. Brandon Cooks just doesn't leave your lineup, literally just commands a 50% target share now, is the only body left in Houston. We're not playing Davis Mills. I shouldn't even have to fucking say that. And we're not going to play the running backs either. Mark Ingram had the 23 carry game in week 1 and hasn't done anything since. David Johnson and Phillip Lindsay are irrelevant. Going over to the Bills, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, up and in your lineup. I'm actually going to trust Zach Moss here, who's played pretty well in 2 out of the last 3 games, and that's largely off of the back of getting in the end zone. But this is just one where I look at the game script and how this game is going to go, and I anticipate Zach Moss falling across the goal line yet again. I'm still not playing Devin Singletary, and I have zero desire to. Let's go to the Colts, taking on the Dolphins now. Injuries here for this game. Carson Wentz is questionable with an ankle injury. Jonathan Taylor is questionable with a knee injury. I think both of these players play. Jonathan Taylor up and in your lineup. Michael Pittman likely going to be in your lineup as well. I would start him as a fringe start right now. You're looking to see his involvement continue to go up. He had a pretty good week 2. Was still involved in week 3. Let's keep the momentum going for this hopeful breakout by the end of the fantasy football season. I'm not going to play Carson Wentz, though. Just looking at what this Colts offense is, this line is an absolute mess right now. I don't trust all of their weapons within the offense itself. And, of course, Carson Wentz is currently battling 2 sprained ankles. Doesn't seem like a good sign to play him as your fantasy quarterback for the week. Going over to the Dolphins side now, no injuries to report. Myles Gaskin I'm in on. Jalen Waddle is actually going to be the wide receiver that I'm in on for the week. You just look at what he did last week with Jacoby Brissett at the quarterback position, and Jalen Waddle had 12 targets. He had 13 targets, 12 receptions it was. That's insane. And it's very, very obvious based off of that who Jacoby Brissett was targeting, because I believe off the top of my head, Will Fuller had 6 targets and Devontae Parker had 7. But you're still looking at a giant target disparity between those 3 guys, and that was one of the things I was really going to look for in that first week, so that way we can properly analyze who is going to be the leading wide receiver for this team going forward, and Jacoby Brissett's favorite target, and that just so happens to be Jalen Waddle. Let's go over to the Washington football team taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Injuries for Washington. Antonio Gibson is questionable with a shoulder injury, and for Atlanta, wide receiver Russell Gage is out with an ankle injury. Russell Gage, droppable at this point if you still have him in your lineup, or on your roster, I should say. And then for Washington, we're going to go with the usual starts here. Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas. Curtis Samuel is coming back off the IR from that groin injury that he suffered in the preseason and during training camp. I don't want to put him in my lineup quite yet. This is a pretty good matchup, admittedly, for Washington, but I want to see it first. I want to see his involvement. I want to see how he's used because I don't know if they're just going to up and active, just let him loose in this game versus Atlanta. So I'm going to hold off on him in this game. For Atlanta, though, Cordell Patterson just gets more and more work, either out of the backfield or being used as a wide receiver. He really is just a Swiss Army knife style player that the Falcons are actually maximizing about time, like fucking finally, right? Cordell Patterson has been around for years, and he finally just lands in a situation that's just using him in a variety of different ways. Calvin Ridley in your lineup as well, and Kyle Pitts doesn't leave your lineup. Off Mike Davis now at this point, though. When you look at what Mike Davis has become in this Falcons backfield, he's splitting carries, not doing a whole lot with it, and this offense, just simply put, isn't good enough right now for him to be a guy that's an auto start for you week in and week out. And yes, Washington's defense has not played up to the standard that we thought it would be, but I just don't trust the Falcons offense really at this point outside of Ridley, Pitts. And the only reason that Cordell Patterson is a start right now is because of that Washington defense and the fact that he's just being maximized more and more week in and week out. Let's go over to the Seahawks taking on the San Francisco 49ers. Tyler Lockett suffered what appeared to be a decently bad knee injury. Came back through last week, though. Is currently battling a hip injury right now. Questionable for this game. I think he's going to play. I'm not too concerned about that. Starts for Seattle. It's the usual. Russell Wilson, Chris Carson, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, always going to be in your starting lineup. And for the 49ers, Elijah Mitchell, running back, questionable with a shoulder injury. And George Kittle is questionable with the calf injury as well. I don't think Mitchell plays. I do think that George Kittle is going to play. And so when we look at starts for this game, Deebo Samuel in your lineup, Trey Sermon likely going to be in your lineup, Brandon Ayuk, we're back, baby. Fire him up and ready to go. George Kittle also in your lineup. This Seahawks defense is not good. They are giving up points left, right, and center. And so this could be a game, too, where if you want to start Jimmy G at home, go ahead and do it. I fully support it. Let's go to the Cardinals taking on the Rams and what's probably going to be my favorite matchup of the week. I just love both these offenses, and then we're going to have just an incredible matchup at the wide receiver cornerback position between DeAndre Hopkins and Jalen Ramsey, my baby boy. So when we're looking at Arizona here, Kyler is going to be in your lineup. Chase Edmonds is going to be in your lineup. I'm not sitting DeAndre Hopkins. I'm just lowering my expectations on what his production could be in that matchup versus Jalen Ramsey. I don't like James Conner here. I don't like A.J. Green. I don't like Rondale Moore. I don't like Christian Kirk. This just, to me, this is going to be a game that's either going to be a race to 50 or it's going to be a game that I think Arizona stalls in just a little bit. And I'm going to try and hedge my bets with Arizona in this matchup. For the Rams, Darrell Henderson is back and healthy coming off of that rib injury. So we got Stafford in our lineup, Darrell Henderson, Cooper Kupp, and Tyler Higbee. And for the first time this season, I'm actually not playing Robert Woods. Just hasn't really been productive. Is still on the field a ton, not commanding the targets that he once was with Jared Goff. And it's just very obvious that Cooper Kupp is the #1 for Los Angeles right now. And as a result, Robert Woods takes this dip, but it's not even been a dip. I mean, it's been a major drop-off from the production that we're used to seeing. So if you have a better option instead of Robert Woods, I would lean with that better option instead. Now let's go to the Steelers taking on the Packers. Chase Claypool is questionable with the hamstring injury, but I want to talk about the Steelers offense right now because holy hell, it's not good. Big Ben is finished. When I was watching Pittsburgh and Cincinnati last week, I could not believe what I was watching. Both how bad this offense looked, how washed Big Ben was, and the decision-making of Big Ben. Literally just giving the ball to Cincinnati. I'm off of Juju and Deontay Johnson. I'm off on Juju because of the reasons and the concerns I have with the offense as a whole. I'm off on Deontay Johnson because of the concerns with the offense and the fact I'm just tired of this fucking injury game with Deontay Johnson. Like, I think I'm at this point now. I will never draft him. I will never draft Deontay Johnson. If you have him, I'm looking to trade him. I just don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with the offensive concerns. I don't want to deal with the injuries. I'm off. Chase Claypool, I don't think plays in this game, and that leaves to me the only viable Steelers option is running back Najee Harris, and the only reason why he's still viable at this point is, one, just the way that they're using him in the pass game. You look at what he did last week, and it was, 19 targets, I believe was the number, 14 receptions, and then he's just the workhorse running back here, and that's always going to be somebody who's valuable for fantasy. For the Packers, Aaron Jones is questionable with an ankle injury. I expect him to play, and we're going to fire with the usual Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, and Robert Tonyan up and in your lineup. I still don't trust A.J. Dillon at this point. Now let's go to the Ravens taking on the Broncos here. No injuries to report for either side here. Lamar's in your lineup. I'm rolling with Latavius Murray over Tyson Williams. I don't know if that's going to be a one-week stretch, but the thing that we've seen for sure is Latavius Murray is automatically going to be involved in this offense, and I can't say the same now for Tyson Williams, who just had a disappearing act in Week 3. Marquise Brown going to be in our lineup, and Mark Andrews as well. I'm sitting Sammy Watkins, Rashad Bateman, rookie wide receiver from Minnesota, who I fucking love, is coming off of IR from a groin injury that he suffered in training camp. Just somebody to keep an eye on. Not going to throw him in my lineup just yet. If he's on the waiver wire right now, that's a really good speculative ad, just in case something happens over the course of the next 2 weeks. You know that you may have a breakout candidate for your team already on your bench. For Denver, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Noah Fant. This is just an offense that I just like. I just like the offensive pieces here a lot. Teddy Bridgewater's a sit, and that's mainly just because of my fear with the Ravens defense. But I trust these other players to have really good individual games. So if you want to make the argument there that Teddy Bridgewater is actually a start, I don't hate you for it. They are at home, so that's also a plus as well. But just looking at what the Denver Broncos pieces have put together week in, week out, there's definitely a world where you start Teddy Bridgewater here as a result, and I'm fine with playing these options for Denver. Let's go to the Sunday night game. Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski's revenge. Gronk, unfortunately, is doubtful with a rib injury that he suffered last week, and for Tampa, we're firing up with the usual here. Tom Brady, the actual running back for Tampa, Leonard Fournette, Godwin, Evans, Brown, all up, ready to go. I'm still not playing Ronald Jones. If you have him on your team, I'm trying to flip him. I would love to try and get something back in return. I don't know what that something is. I would rather have Damian Harris. I would rather have Zach Moss, actually. If you want to try and swing for like a Kenyon Drake or a James Conner, I don't hate that either. If you want to try and go for Javonte Williams, somebody who hasn't really broken out yet, and you package Ronald Jones and a piece to get Javonte, I kind of like that too. Just some ideas to really float around there for you. For New England, I'm starting Damian Harris, and that's it. I hate this offense. This offense is atrocious. It's not good. They don't move the ball well, and there's just a lot of concerns here between their weapons, their quarterback, and just the offensive system as a whole. No fucking thanks. And lastly, let's round this out. Monday night, between the Raiders and the Chargers, Josh Jacobs is questionable with an ankle injury. No injuries to report for the Chargers. I'm starting Derek Carr here. I just think that this game goes into a shootout, very, very likely. Peyton Barber, who saw a workhorse load last week in Week 3. Darren Waller, always going to be in your lineup. Kenyon Drake, you can play, and maybe I should actually change these. I'm going to. I'm not going to have Drake or Edwards or Ruggs as a sit, but if you got to play them, you can. They're interesting flex plays. I'll leave it at that. Those are all guys that you can throw in at your flex position, especially if you're desperate and you are just like, oh boy, I'm facing the league juggernaut. If you want to throw Ruggs in this game, that's really interesting to me. I think that he very well could find his way into the end zone this week. Going to the Chargers, we're rolling with the usual here between Herbert, Eckler, Allen, and Mike Williams. Like, Mike Williams' season is here. I tried to resist it as long as possible, but I have been convinced that Mike Williams is actually going to be a thing fucking finally in the year 2021, and I'm off Jared Cook pretty much forever now at this point. Just hasn't really done it. Is not a focal point in this offense in the way that Hunter Henry was, and really Mike Williams has overtaken that role as the number 2 option in the pass game. But that's actually going to do it for this game. Hang on, whoops, that's the music. We don't want that. that's going to do it for this game. It's going to do it for our Week 4 preview. So thank you so much for watching. Again, if you enjoyed, be sure to hit the like button down below. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a weekly preview from me. Again, different kinds of content are going to be coming to the channel very, very soon. I'm really excited about the things that we have cooking over here at Fantasy Vulture. Follow me on all social media platforms at FF Vulture, and I will see you in the next video. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever, and I will see you next time.